Hi, Stuart. Thank you so much for joining me on our podcast today. This is
Pleasure.
Lights Camera XR. And yeah, today we would like to know more about your perspective of lighting sets for virtual production and the kind of work that you've done and kind of shed light, if I may, on how it's done in the industry. So yeah, thank you so much again for joining us.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So you've lit a lot of sets, both traditional as well as virtual production sets. What's something that you would say is the most standout difference between the two?
Um, I think the most standout difference is maybe twofold. One for me, and also one mainly for the artist. For the artist to be on set and actually see a tree, see a mountain, see a street, whatever it is that's in the background, or a snowy scene. Maybe to help them feel the cold, the heat.
Hmm.
One of your student films was a mountain with a kind of hot house on the left of scene. Um, that sort of thing helps, especially when you have a young artist there. I think acting against green is it's like another element they have to think of. And then from
Hmm.
a DP, to have that light emanating from the screen. And there was actually recently quite a debate, turned into a bit of an argument, I think, as
Hmm.
so many things online do,
Yes.
um, about volume not being a light source.
Hmm.
I totally disagreed. I think
Yeah.
it's a fantastic light source and cool. I mean, to get a 17-foot wide light source, how?
Hmm.
How are
Yeah.
you going how else would you get that? It's such a fantastic uh, thing to have that can be multicolored. You can split it up so
Correct.
quickly.
Hmm.
IBL, image-based lighting, is such a valuable tool to have. Um, so going back to that debate that was online, I think it kind
Hmm.
of fell a bit flat when IBL, if you're reflecting into something reflective like a car, be it a matte wrapped car or a glossy, car, to have the scene reflected in the hood or the windshield is fantastic. I mean, and
Hmm.
also to have all in camera,
Yeah.
even better. It's I see VFX.
Hmm. Hmm.
Our industry is so full of abbreviations, but yeah, in-camera
True.
video effects are,
That's true.
it's so helpful. And when you're doing short films or very,
Hmm.
very low budget pieces, to have it all pretty much there before you go to edit is such a bonus. It really
Hmm.
lifts the piece.
That's
Um,
true.
I'm
And
thinking that they're the main things that alleviate VP, be it an LED volume or be it a green screen, that when you look at the monitor or the artist look at the monitor and the client looks at the monitor and it's already got, whatever the image is already there, the mountain scene, let's say,
hmm.
uh, is a great tool. And also, to be fair, when you look at the image, the stock image that they want to use on the background, if you're shooting green or blue screen, to have rather than just a picture, I think, okay, so it's kind of bluey, coldy, I'll make that, and obviously the green screen will be there. To have the actual image there and on the screen, and to have a little bit brighter key here, I mean, it's fantastic. It's such a useful tool, and it really speeds up the day. There will always
Hmm.
be some other head of department, sometimes the director even. I said, "Oh, do you think that'll work? Do you think that lighting level's about right?" Those conversations don't need to happen when it's within VP or virtual green screen because it's there on the screen, and you're not really going to present it until you feel it does work.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Hmm.
sure. There are always going to be the conversation is just that, do you think it could be a bit darker or, a bit brighter or a little bit more keyed this side or
Yeah.
whatever? Then yeah, sure. If that's what you feel, or look, let me show you the reason I didn't do this is because, and then
Hmm.
whatever. But yeah, I embrace it. You may have shared with the students that reel I gave you. That's all virtual
Hmm.
production. Obviously, bits of it, not every single film.
Hmm.
First frame to last frame, just some scenes. There
Yeah.
were three films in there that were all virtual production backgrounds, but they span quite a big period of time of my career, and I've always tried to promote. It's one of my favorite ways of lighting a car has always been with projectors using a rear projection screen because
Okay.
the animated light on a car is stunning. And within
Hmm.
commercials where they're just trying to elevate, yet another car above another car, it just gives you that, and it's so fast as well. It just gives you that extra edge, which
Hmm.
is
Would you say that, so you were talking about image-based lighting. Is that similar to what people call like pixel streaming?
yeah. So like a vortex, I think you can split it up into eight different sections.
Hmm.
Uh,
Hmm.
or, well, it depends on which one you've got,
Yeah.
but yeah, there are pieces of software. I believe Assimilate is one. There's
Hmm.
quite a few. And basically, you can run the image. Let's just say it's me against a white wall. Well, that's a bit dull. Let's just say it was that one of the desert with the
Hmm.
house. You can run that through the software, and then it'll program the lights to look like um, the scene. I
Okay.
mean, by eye, it doesn't really, but you can kind of map out. It's almost as if you've put a thin diffusion up against the window and you're looking through the diffusion and you can see, oh, look, there's a blue sky,
I
there's
see.
green
Okay.
bushes,
Hmm.
that kind of thing.
Hmm.
And it does help. It really does.
Hmm.
Especially with Blair, the
Hmm.
aperture's new color science, that really helps too. That is a different way of IBL. The IBL there is getting the color science to match the image that you've put into the UI,
Hmm.
basically. Um,
And
one for everybody to have a look at is
mhm.
a company called Sumo Light.
Sumo, yeah.
Yeah, like the wrestlers. And
Hmm.
their IBL is probably actually the softest light source I've ever artificial light source I've ever seen. I mean, other than a bounce light, nothing has come close, and it's direct. It's mad, absolutely mad.
Wow. Okay.
I adored it. It was a really good system. It's not cheap, but it's a really good system, and yeah, I just wish it was more widely available.
Hmm. When it comes to your work as a DP in virtual production sets, do you find yourself trying to light more for what the lens can take in, or is it more for how the LED screen itself outputs the light or the environment?
I'm almost going back to the first point about me loving the LED volume as a fantastic light source. I try and use that.
Hmm.
I don't want to say as the key because that's a little bit unfair when it comes to DOP or cinematography. But
Hmm.
yeah, I do use that as the major source of light and will then augment that with further sources. I mean, there are things that in Europe, I'm not quite sure, I can't remember what you called them in America. We called them wild walls, which was like another screen, which probably would have a higher pixel a lower sort of pixel pitch than the wall, but it would have the same image on it, and then you could bring that a bit closer. The wild walls are very good for lighting. Another way of doing it is light cards, which are basically outside the frustum. Uh, you would use the panels outside the image and make them much, much brighter. And that's our dog coming to say hello. You could make them much, much brighter. So let's say that scene in the Where Do All the Cars Go? I think that was the title. Sorry if I've just
Yes.
given the title. Um, you could have outside of where the frustum is, so you had the tree on the right, the
Hmm.
mountains, presumably a sky, and
Hmm.
then the house on the left. You could have had that image, say two, three stops brighter on the left, where the house was, and then reduce the exposure on the screen and to allow the light to wrap around the artists a little bit more from the back, but
Hmm.
have that house still within, the dynamic range of the whatever camera you were using at the time.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, that would be really useful for the team to know about that. Thank you
yeah.
for giving feedback on that as well.
What tracking system do you use at the
So
uni?
we are using the Red Spice type tracking
Yeah,
system.
very
Yeah.
good. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, so
And
outside of the first
mhm,
room there, you could have had that whole part of the screen on the sides, yeah, a couple of
mhm.
stops brighter. Or
Okay,
even or even just the house, just
I see.
replicate the house twice. So the house
Hmm.
was coming up the left of the screen and going over the top, so it was a real hot light, but the
Hmm.
correct light, the
Hmm.
correct color temperature
Hmm.
and thing. It's also a very
Okay.
fast way of working just to do
Yeah.
that.
Hmm. What are some of the biggest kind of misconceptions that when you talk to people who are either new to virtual production or even the directors you work with, or say even the actors or talent, what's some biggest misconceptions for working on LED virtual production sets?
I think the talent think that they can stand within a couple of feet of it and touch
Okay.
stuff and maybe
Yeah.
even have a shelf there and put a bottle next to it. Obviously, that doesn't work. I think the misconceptions from a most of my income comes from advertising agencies, so I do maybe TVCs, spots. I think it's the misconception there is that it's a one-stop shop for everything,
Mm. Mm-hmm.
and it isn't.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It doesn't do everything that a location can do. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
do everything that potentially green screen could do, or CG could do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it is a fantastic tool, as your students are probably already finding out that there are certain scripts that lend itself to virtual production than others. And
Correct.
yeah, it's still it's in its infancy when you compare it to rear projection, front
Mm-hmm.
projection,
Mm-hmm.
green screen,
Mm-hmm.
blue screen, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It's still in its infancy, and still, there are uh, like a learning curve really for green screen too. I mean, that's obviously not in its infancy, but it has limitations too, and you can't do everything in green screen. It's just, some things will have to be CG.
Mm-hmm.
So it's it is interesting though what works and what doesn't work. I think very brave of the Where Do All the Cars Go film to have such a daylight. It was towards the end of the day or the beginning of the day, low
Mm-hmm.
light. Um, it's when you have a high noon sun coming from a screen, there's a certain CRI kind of feeling and also exposure range that's a very tricky thing to then emulate on the
Hmm.
set and get
Hmm.
both to match. If the script is early or late sun, low sun, then it's a lot easier.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, it's a lot more believable for
Hmm.
sure, especially if you're restricted to the type of lights that you can use to try and match with the screen.
So talking about the scripts and kind of matching those different kinds of lighting, I did see the work that you did for the Lufthansa commercial, or was it a commercial, or was it more of like the in-flight
Exactly.
announcement?
It
Yeah.
was
So
it's
the
yeah,
in-flight, yeah.
yeah, it was the in-flight demo
Hmm.
film, and yeah, myself and the producer were very well, we're actually boyfriend girlfriend,
Okay.
but we were very much parallel in line about what scenes could work and couldn't work. The UE artist is one of the best I've ever come across,
Hmm.
and he was very uh, powerful in those chats too about no, I don't really think that's going to work. And some of the asset images that they were using as references, we were sort of saying, look, we've been here before. In order for this to work with the sort of time frame we've got, the restrictions we've got within the studio, it really does need to be a lower light. Oh, we can't have everything in lower light. No, I understand that, but well, that maybe
Hmm.
is when we use something else like green screen or something. But
I see.
they uh, they insisted upon it all being on the volume, and it was one of those sort of things where we were kind of keen to sort of say, well, maybe on the day we can all collectively say that this scene would be better at lower light, and because of the way that the UE asset had been built, we could lower and raise the sun, obviously within seconds. Um, but it was tricky. There were some scenes in there that I was very pleased with, and there were some that it was just, I don't know, there was just too much going on to make it believable.
Hmm.
And the amount of S effects you would have used in the scene, sorry, in the studio to then bring the screen to have it all marry and be as one was very not conducive to an online safety film.
Hmm. Hmm.
One of the weird things,
Hmm.
one of the very weird things, and within TVCs, it's there's always something you just think, what? Where did that come from? One of the things that they don't put in online on in-flight safety films is altitude.
Hmm. Hmm.
They don't want because people get vertigo.
Yeah. Hmm.
You're on a plane. You're about to go to 30,000 feet. So yeah, we had to be really careful of the Mount Fuji
I
thing.
see. Yeah.
They have foreground trees, and they had to be
Hmm.
a UV asset because they couldn't afford to bring in trees,
Hmm.
tops of trees in
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
foreground, and then we would have to be on a stage decking
Hmm.
to hide the plant plots or however we'd rigged them.
Hmm.
But yeah, that was a learning curve.
That's nice to know.
We
You
can't
speak,
show height on a safety film. Yeah,
yeah.
very odd.
You're talking about how the Unreal Engine assets play like a very key component of how the final product looks on the LED volume. Have you also played around with like image plates or just video plates as backdrops with LED volumes? And how has that been different to light?
Yes, if the asset is a 2D image, a photograph,
Hmm.
then um, it can work fantastic.
Okay.
If there is no change, in other words, everybody, including myself, has signed off that that image is, you know, it's all done. If you were then to try and change something in there, like the height of the sun or the
Hmm.
position of the sun, obviously you can't. And then you end up having two suns, which isn't a no-no. It can work. It just depends where the sun was. Um, let's just say that having a 2D image isn't the end of the world. They can work fantastically because sometimes, the amount of detail that's in a photograph would take days, weeks for depending on the size of the scene, for a UE artist to emulate.
Hmm.
So I really like working with 2D images, and sometimes they're just, perfect. But
Hmm.
other times, the most obvious one would be to have a 2D sky
Hmm. Hmm.
behind a UE, whatever, garden or
Hmm.
something. And there's just something about it that, it just renders itself to be very believable. And, it has levels of detail that would have taken time away from the UE artist to create a better looking garden. If he or she has a sky already done, great. But
So,
then obviously you have the restrictions of we
mhm.
can't sun. And then when you're doing, when you're looking to the left and then to the right and then straight on, ideally you would want to move the sun,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
you can't always.
This actually ties into one of the student questions that we received. And one of the questions that the students asked was, is there a rule of thumb for kind of matching the direction and the quality of the light from a virtual background to what the lighting would be on the subject? Because most of the students are still learning to play around with Unreal Engine and trying to understand the capabilities that it has. So as of now, very few of them actually have that full skill set to work with Unreal Engine. So most are using like image and video plates. So how would you say it would be like a rule of thumb to follow to kind of match that lighting from that image or video plate to what you would like the subject?
The most obvious one would be the color space that the image, be it UE or 2D, on the background is in, to then have your camera at the same setting. If you're using, say, vintage lenses or a lens that's renowned for being extremely warm, then you're then taking it to be, you're then adjusting colors that may not all marry. Um, Using your RGB WW or Blair type light, that helps. Um, Obviously, I'm going quite expensive now, but from a basic point of view, start with the color spaces matching camera and background. And then if the set of lenses that you only have access to are neutral, fantastic. Oh, what a great start. If the lenses are cold or new or warm, then you may need to then start changing
Hmm.
uh, how the lights are, or maybe you can tweak the screen. But
Hmm.
maybe those warmer lenses actually help. And
Hmm. Hmm.
again, don't use it as a rod for your back. Did you see the Booper film I shot, which was started in a snowy scene and then went to?
Yeah, the Bupa one. Yep.
So that's a classic example of not being in the same color space all the time because we
Mm.
felt that sometimes the color space matching actually didn't feel right. So I
Hmm.
changed it. I didn't change the volume. I only changed the camera because it's so super super quick. Uh,
Hmm. Hmm.
so yeah, but and just why did I change it? 709 was a bit crunchy. 2020 was a little bit more open, and I felt like the more open stuff worked for the snowy scene and the desert scene with the lady on the floor,
Yeah.
taking samples of that was a really tricky one, and I wasn't very happy with it at all.
Hmm.
The 2D image on the background just had an odd contrast level that was extremely difficult to get to match in the
Mm.
studio without it just looking muddy and shitty.
Hmm.
And again, we were running out of time, and everyone, after I'd taken a little bit too long to try and get it to match, I think everyone just sort of said, "Don't worry, we'll sort it out in the grade." And I was just thinking to myself, I don't think you can.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
anyway, yeah, it. that was as best as I could do on the day, and it pretty much matches what we shot. And so, no, they couldn't sort it out in the grade. But nobody really liked that scene anyway. So actually, in some cuts, it didn't make that cut anyway. But yeah. So the rule of
This,
thumb would be
mhm,
match the color space. There's your first thing, and then that will get you much closer to it all fitting in. And then yeah, have a play, really look to see, have a think about how that scene was lit. And then, was it an overcast sky? Was it
mhm,
just a huge sky?
mhm,
Is
mhm,
it down an alleyway? So there's big tall buildings and there's only a little bit of sky. Well, just have a think about how that would then affect the subject and the scene.
mhm,
Um, that's really all I can add because I think every scene is different. I
yeah.
mean, the Lufthansa one, especially. I mean, we were cutting from one country to another country to another country to.
Mhm, mhm.
It was, yeah, a
So
workout. That one.
that ties into the second student question that I actually got, which was when shooting images of video plate backdrops, so creating those backdrops to put on the LED volumes, how do you figure out where the light should be the best angle at? So do you normally go for low lit backdrops, or do you normally like say brighter backdrops work the best? And which one is the easiest to match when coming onto the LED volume set?
Uh, if I was the one going out to get the asset, I would
Hmm.
shoot in low light. I
Okay.
think it's a far more evocative
Hmm.
time of day.
Hmm.
Um, and one of the other reasons for doing that within a volume,
Hmm.
LED volume, be it a small one or a large one, it is a lot more believable to get the foreground, what you'll be shooting on the day, to
Hmm.
match and gel in with
Hmm.
the screen. Just the screen technology, the way it is, whether it's in the new high contrast panels or the older low contrast
Hmm.
panels, which I actually prefer, um, it's difficult,
Hmm.
if you
Hmm.
are midday,
Hmm.
because we don't have that kind of contrast range that you can do. And if you do light somebody with that kind of contrast range, it's often not that aesthetically pleasing.
Hmm.
So, yeah, so my suggestion would be low light and then you have a better chance of getting it to match.
Hmm. And how do you kind of avoid the subject looking almost like a cutout and pasted in front of a backdrop? Because that's something we've noticed with most students trying to figure out lighting, where to place their physical practical lights versus how much of brightness should be on the volume. Most of the scenes so far, as we've been learning, the subject almost looks like they've been cut and pasted on that backdrop. So how do you kind of blend the two in?
It's a subject distance thing.
Okay.
That's one. So try and get your subject a reasonable distance from the wall. The
Hmm.
further they are from the wall, the more out of focus the wall is. So that's all instantly going to give you that line. The
Hmm.
slightly closer they are, within reason, there's a kind of edge effect which will help.
Hmm.
Using lens choice is a extremely important one. If you use a long lens, then the depth of field fall off will be greater over the person's body. Um, a trick is to buy 1/8 diopters. Diopters can often sharpen the subject, so it can actually work against you. But if you get it right with a 1/8 or a quarter, it will actually decrease the depth of field, so you can
Hmm.
still use wider lenses.
Hmm.
Um, on the subject of depth of field, use fast lenses, 1.4s. If you're full frame, there are many sets of 1.4s, 1.3 sets that are full frame. That helps. So depth of field check, You could use longer lenses, but that's not everybody's taste. It can be a bit voyeuristic. The film, it's nice to use wides and be close. Um, but a wide lens close up doesn't have a great depth of field anyway. So, like a 35 mil
Hmm.
up close, especially on full frame. Um, the larger the sensor generally enables you to use not as wide a lens to get a
Hmm.
wide shot. Um, Another thing is tiny, tiny bit of haze in the
Hmm.
studio that
Mm.
separate subject from background.
Mm.
That was used in Bupa, Lufthansa, Squarespace. What was the other one that you were talking about? Oh, the Slender one. That was a
Hmm.
beauty film, so I wanted it to be super sharp, and it was rear projection, so I could have the background kind of sharp. Um, and then when you are in post, if you use Resolve,
Hmm.
you could use the mid detail, drop it, between 10 and 20.
Hmm.
That can often blend the edges
I see.
nicely.
Hmm. That's cool. That's really interesting to know. You were talking about the Squarespace ads. What was kind of like the biggest lighting challenge that you faced in that? Because you had the entire like ocean scene in the background with the people standing on the ship, and that almost looked like it was shot on scene. So, what was the biggest challenge you had during shooting something like that?
It was meant to be a kind of dodgy uh, charter boat um, captain who kind of knew it wasn't the ideal day to take a wedding party out in the middle of the sea. And it really was the middle of the sea. It's the bit of land between New Zealand and Australia. So it's known as the Cut. And it's far out. And I was kind of wanting it to be there had to be part of the story where the weather was fine because there wouldn't there'd be you would have thought there'd be people going, oh, why are we going out like this, and then as the storm started coming in, um the challenge there was just the massive expanse of sky that they hadn't managed to get. Some of it was 2D. They hadn't
Mhm.
managed to get any UE elements in there. But the artists that they managed to get in for me and they also hadn't quoted for him or her to be on set while we were shooting, and so it didn't allow me to make any changes. But anyway, they quickly changed that when they realized, oh, really? Well, they can put birds in. I went, yeah, 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 they can put birds in. So we got some birds in there. I think there was one scene with a plane, just tiny things to make, and also I got the clouds to move. And I know that commercials nearly always 2-second cuts, but if you can just have a little bit of life in there, it's great. Um, we weren't making a horror film, and I wanted the ship to be dark, the boat to be darker, and that instantly, in my mind, made it gel straight into the background. But they wanted the boat to be brighter because they spent all this money having a boat built. And I was like, well, I
So the
understand,
boat
but
was a practical set piece.
yes.
Oh, okay. Wow.
So all the people real, all the boat was real. It was on a gimbal,
Okay.
um, and it had four art department just literally rocking it side to side manually with big metal levers just out of shot.
Hmm.
And I shot I shot a lot of the wides without the frustum, and I didn't use ceiling lights. I used the screen up on the ceiling, and what I did was I used a light card at the back just to help backlight it. And
Hmm.
I don't know if it made the cut, but we had lightning in one, and we just flashed the back panel of the top screen for that,
Mm.
and it worked
Hmm.
really, really well. But it's that thing where you're almost dictating edit points
Hmm. Hmm.
on set, which I'm happy to do, but you need a little bit of, especially for the American market and modern markets today, where you have so many different 16:9, 14:9, 4:3, 9:16. You have all these different versions, and it's not always going to work. So, yeah, I
Hmm.
had to be very careful not to always use the lightning. But that worked very well for the ceiling piece to have to be my lightning strike.
Hmm. How long does it normally take you to set your lighting up before you start rolling?
Uh, I'm happy to pre-light in the morning, shoot in the afternoon,
Okay.
get some scenes done in the afternoon. It is a wonderful luxury to have an entire day to get the lights.
Hmm.
Majority of the studios I work in aren't necessarily like the university one. I'm just guessing. They don't have any lights, so you rock
Hmm.
up to completely empty
Okay.
stage, and the screen's there, obviously, and that's it. And then you bring the camera in, build it up. You all the lights come in on trucks, they unload them, then they got to lay the cable, the distribution, the DMX cables. It's 1 o'clock.
Hmm.
By
Hmm.
that time, all that's done, and then I can actually start switching stuff on and looking at it. Um, so there's your half day.
Mm.
Normally, once everything's in and I've got an idea where I want the first scene's lights to be, yeah, I mean, it takes once everything's in, probably takes an hour and a half just to get things. But a lot of it is we're in the business of communication and nobody communicates, something I've always said. Um,
Hmm.
Part of the pre-light is it's not a film just for me. There's
Hmm.
many, many other people I have to say. So that 90 minutes, which is quite a long time to be fair, is putting the lights up, getting them right, and then showing, the director, do you like this? Yeah, they love it. Great. Okay, let's show it to the client and the agency, or the agency, then the client, and then, they've got an idea or they say something, and it's like, okay, and then back to the grind wheel, grindstone, and then we have to change it again. So yeah, 90 minutes is a pretty good
Hmm.
for that first shot
Mm.
after they've got all the equipment in.
Okay. And does that change depending on whether you're shooting people versus car commercials?
A car, it would probably be a lot quicker
Okay.
because the volume would be the key.
Okay. Okay.
You know, if it's low light, like a dusk dawn shot, just to for the wide of the car, then yeah, I mean you can get that from the asset almost on its
Hmm.
own. You just augment the maybe the wheels or something on the non-screen side of the car.
Hmm.
And then after that, it's normally a scene or shot rather, not scene, every 20 minutes.
Hmm. Hmm.
You've lit, shot, moved on, lit, shot, moved on, lit, shot, moved on. So that's three times. So that's you know, your hour.
The the student films that we normally do, or at least have done here, have all been kind of the goal was to make sure everything was shot on a volume. Is that ever the case in the industry where they want every shot to be on a volume, or is it always just like one or two shots in an entire commercial that uses a volume?
It's so case dependent. Taking the three films you've highlighted on my reel were
Hmm.
100% volume. Yeah, all
Okay.
three.
Okay. Wow.
Mm.
And have you ever used this almost seems counterintuitive, but have you ever used the LED volume as a green screen or a blue screen?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
100%.
Could you tell
Yeah,
me
I
more
mean,
about
I actually
those?
think within the TVC world, it's actually a slightly better way of working
Hmm.
because there's always going to be somebody who's not on set or wasn't shared that image that everybody approved that's higher up in the food chain than the people that were on set.
Hmm.
Uh, that says, I don't like that.
Hmm. Hmm.
And to change it, as your students know, it's difficult.
Yeah.
So now, ideally, if we are working with a tricky client, then you could shoot it with ghost frame, phantom track. So
Yes.
you've got the green screen pass as well as the image pass on global shutter camera, like the Red Raptor X.
We're using a
That
red
works very
Komodo
well.
right now.
Yeah, there you go. And that's the
Hmm.
X one,
I think it's the older one, the red
the
Komodo
non-global
6K. Yeah.
shutter. Yeah. Well, the global shutter one has the phantom track
Hmm.
ability.
Hmm.
It works really well.
Yeah. Have you ever done any commercials where you kind of had to bring in extra LED panels, and how did that kind of work? Like more than what was there in the studio?
Uh, the Lufthansa one had wild walls.
Okay.
So they were a far higher, they were basically old
Hmm.
panels left over from a ceiling
Hmm.
or an earlier build, and they used them as wild walls. So they were brought in as extra lighting sources, IBL, and they were also brought in because uh, we were the workload was so great that we needed a second unit. So we
Hmm.
actually, for some of the close-up shots, so we used the wild walls as the background for second unit. Fantastic IBL, and there were close-ups, so the background would have been so out of focus you wouldn't have seen that it was double the pitch of the main wall.
Hmm.
Closer to 5 mil rather than two.
Hmm. What are some of the things that you'd wish like DPs or filmmakers or just getting into virtual production kind of know before they walk into an LED volume?
Um, a lot are very, very dismissive of it. And that's such a silly thing. It's like to be dismissive of red, to be dismissive of black magic, to be dismissive of shooting on a DSLR. Well, you know, there is some fantastic content on YouTube, and it's, if not better sometimes than some of the stuff you would see in the cinema. It just depends where it's come from. I mean, it depends who's made it. It depends how they've put it together. There's some fantastic stuff shot on action cameras, be a 360 or a GoPro
Hmm.
or another brand. So it's to be less dismissive of it. It is a fantastic tool, and we have so many tools in our arsenal that it's just another one, really. And the other one is maybe have a bit more of an understanding of its limitations. Like a
Hmm.
screen will never provide a hard light, like a
Yeah.
hard shadow on the
Hmm.
floor, which is, potentially something that a lot of people want. They want, sunlight. Um, One thing I would wish for is the panels to be able to pop in and out a lot faster.
Mm.
Most of the studios I've worked at have said, yeah, yeah, no, we'll pop a panel. We can pop a panel and put a light through it or a mirror, and then you bounce the light into a mirror. Um, it's quite painful to do.
Hmm.
And, it's not like changing a light from, I don't know, 1K to a 2K or a 600 to a 1200. It's not as quick as that. No, it's
Hmm.
quite laborious. That would be lovely to be able to have the panels come
That
out.
that's something I can relate to because I'm also like the virtual production technician. So whenever there's a set that I'm always there. If there's any time any of the panels kind of die on the set, I am the one who goes and replaces them as well.
And just
So,
so the students know, it's not unique to your university. I've been in,
mhm.
30, $40,000 a day stages and higher, and the panels have been dying, or they've had to replace the panels in the morning, or some of them need pushed back in
Yep.
overnight to cool down, and the corners have popped out.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's it's a nice thing to do in the morning is when they put the test panel on, you just wander around with your coffee, just punching them in, helping them push back the corners. So
Hmm. Hmm.
yeah, that happens in professional stages too. If some of the students are considering the uni stage is not professional, but
Hmm. What are like any behind the scenes kind of like funny moments that you've noticed or like taken away that you've been a part of in terms of lighting or like framing?
I did shoot. I think it was in a Lufthansa job. We did shoot part of the scene that the artist was looking one way, we were looking the other way. The car was going in a certain direction, and we had the volume going the wrong way. So it looked like they were reversing. And it took a couple of rehearsals before we all went, oh, it's in
Yeah.
reverse.
Hmm. Hmm. That's
But
nice.
I think that sort of thing can be embraced.
Hmm.
You could do, I don't know, contra zooms without moving the camera, and it's the background that just zooms up in you. You can do uh, really tricky driving scenes in reverse, and nobody
Hmm.
really knows. Or you can do beautiful time lapses with the light and or weather
Hmm.
systems coming in that come in much faster. So it is again, it's a fantastic tool to be embraced. It's just yet another tool. Doesn't
Hmm.
it doesn't work for everything,
Hmm.
but it works for a lot of things.
Are there any upcoming shoots you can share about that you're excited and looking forward to working on, or looking forward to the content being released that you did recently from a virtual production set?
Uh, I Everything that was volume so far has been released. I've got a car shoot. It hasn't been confirmed, so I'm now talking about it, so it probably won't be confirmed. Sod's law. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. It's a test piece to promote a production facility, um, which I'm looking forward to. So I really hope that gets green lit, and then we're off.
That's nice. And that's going to be all LED volume as well.
100%. Yeah, that's
Oh,
the whole
wow.
reason for doing it at volume. There are certain
Hmm.
advertising agencies out there with their little green footprint that they've got. Um, they have a certain mandate now to do at least X% in volume rather than fly around the world to get it.
Oh, okay. So
Hmm.
would you say in the UK, or have you had experience with this in the US as well, that LED volumes are kind of preferred more like for the green footprint purposes over like actually shooting it on set?
I think it's a fine balance between the two with reality, practical,
Hmm.
and uh, yeah, I mean, obviously, flying 20 crew around the world or more isn't as environmentally sustainable as all just traveling a couple of
Hmm.
miles to the studio and shooting
Hmm.
in. And obviously, from a celebrity point of view, when they give I don't know 20 hours a year to New Balance, and we've got them for 3 hours, then that's often home to home, and
Hmm.
it's not when they step on stage. Sometimes it is. So for them just to travel a short distance to a stage with a volume, then we can suddenly be at night on a running track. We can be in a top floor of a hotel with a beautiful view. I mean, you can just do so much
Hmm.
and maximize the use of that celebrity uh, actor, whatever time. And yeah, it's great. And also, the wonderful thing about celebrities, be they sports or social media or whatever, is they have a skill set that often isn't acting.
Hmm.
So to bring them into an environment like we were going back to in the very beginning of this chat, to bring them into an environment that I don't know, they're a tennis player and they're not on a tennis court, they're in a whatever. And the volume behind has that image to promote this scene. It just helps massively, you know.
Yeah.
It
Hmm.
really does. It's all there. And they go, oh, right. Yeah, I understand. I'm in a casino. I'm supposed to be doing
Hmm.
this, supposed to be
Yeah.
doing that. No tennis balls, there's no tennis racket, but no, I get this. And to be in a studio with a green screen with a load of tape, gaffer
Hmm.
tape crosses on the background isn't conducive really to that person being able to perform.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Do you have any last word that you want to share with the audience?
I think just enjoy and embrace volumes. It's not everything, it's not the answer to everything. It can just massively help you. And if you can make a script that has, 50, 60% of it in the volume, then you've hopefully then got more funds to then go and shoot the car scene or the scene wherever that
Hmm.
um, you wouldn't necessarily have had you had to pay for all the other locations that you shot on the volume. And I think work closer with the UE artist to get better assets and allow
Hmm.
them enough time to give you a better asset.
Hmm.
Uh, the less time you give, 9 times out of 10, the less you're going to like the
Hmm.
asset.
Hmm.
He or she needs a chunk of time to build you the perfect asset, and
Hmm.
give them as many references as possible. And you use something like Frame.io or something, collaborative that they can share progress and just
Hmm.
say, yeah, what do you think to this quick screenshot? And then you
Hmm.
can
Hmm.
jump ahead. It's a collaborative process. It needs a brilliant asset, and that asset can be the making or breaking of your final film.
Hmm.
And also, just going back to not to pick holes, but there were I only managed to see two films, but the car, where do all the cars go film. Um, just consider the whole process and really have a look at the Foley and audio effects, because that would
Hmm.
help bring the characters into that environment, that asset, a lot more, to have a little bit more ambient audio. I
Hmm.
was listening to it on a laptop. I know that's not like surround
Hmm.
sound stage, but I mean, even still,
Hmm.
I did feel that that was missing.
Hmm. Hmm. That's fair. Yeah. Thank you so much for spending time with us on this
Pleasure
podcast and really appreciate all the
for
valuable
asking.
insights.
Thank you very much.